In this lecture, we're going to talk about Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, and I want to talk about this idea of male bonding within the patriarchal military system that's depicted in the film. So we'll look at some examples of gender conformity and peer pressure. So particularly, we'll look at two characters, Private Pyle, who we've seen or we talked about already as kind of failing to meet gender expectations. And we'll also look at Joker and how his struggles are also part of Pyle's struggles to fit in. So Joker is sort of feels the pressure from his fellow soldiers to treat Pyle in a way that sort of humiliates or shames him. So we'll see that in today's lecture as well. All right, so let's continue talking about full. So male bonding is sort of represented in different kinds of relationships in the part one of the film. You have a kind of mentor relationship, homosocial mentorship with Sergeant Hartman. But the male bond between the soldiers themselves is almost, it's described as like a brotherhood, almost like a fraternity type of situation where each man sort of joins together with his fellow peers and they form a kind of brotherhood where you see yourself as part of this sort of unit that's bonded together. And you'll notice, there's no women in this military unit. It's just men. So it's very much a sort of homosocial male bonding experience of being a soldier at this time. And there's a lot of kind of peer pressure involved as well, and gender policing. So if you don't fit in, there are sort of consequences for not performing your gender identity. And we see a sort of positive form of male bonding in the relationship that develops between Joker and Pyle. Pyle sort of seems he becomes kind of dependent on Joker's kindness and teaching. So Joker becomes kind of like a mentor figure, another teacher, as opposed to Hartman, who's the cold, sort of mean teacher or father figure. Joker is sort of like an older brother type. That's someone who Pyle looks up to, who teaches him, who looks after him, even, buttoning up his shirt and, helping him, make his bed and teaching him how to tie his shoelaces proper according to the sort of regulations. So he's taking all these steps, Joker's taking all these steps to sort of really help out his friend and, this almost like a brother to him at this point. So somebody that he wants also to succeed. So he doesn't want to leave any man behind as well. So he's sort of helping Pyle improve himself as a soldier. So Joker's really taking on this leadership role, and he's a very sort of supportive example of a supportive male bond in the film. So it's even more sort of surprising when that relationship or friendship falls apart, and we'll see that at the end of part one, where Pyle is beaten on by the other Marines. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But male bonding in this relationship is sort of, it starts out very sort of positive, and then it becomes more and more sort of ruined, destroyed by Pyle's failure to meet gender expectations, and the pressures that Joker feels to conform to gender expectations as well. So Pyle is he fails to meet gender expectations even after Private Joker has helped him. He's helped him sort of get through some of those physical obstacles that have been sort of detrimental to his training. And he's really sort of succeeded in making Pyle a lot sort of stronger physically. But there's still certain weaknesses. He lacks this self-discipline and has a hard time sort of just taking care of himself and following military protocol. And it ends up being this scene where Hartman comes to inspect all the men, and they're all lined up there in their sort of t-shirts and underwear ready to be inspected, and Hartman sort of looks at each one and tells them what's wrong with each one of them. And Pyle's footlocker is not locked properly. Hartman dumps it out and finds a donut. So this is, a definite breaking of rules. And as a punishment, it's not Pyle who is punished, but rather the rest of the men, the platoon, who has also failed. So it sort of pushes this idea that all the men together form this one singular unit, and it's only as strong as that kind of brotherhood or unit. So if there's a weak link in that chain, it can take down the whole unit. So Pyle is viewed as this weak link in this chain, and he is ostracized, excluded, and humiliated in front of the others, and they will be punished by they're forced to do push-ups while he eats this donut. But that's just Hartman's punishment. It becomes a more of a source of shame as it goes on when the men themselves punish Pyle for his failure to meet gender expectations. So the scene culminates with the men, the Marines, pinning down Pyle and beating him with bars of soap that have been sort of wrapped up in towels, and they all take turns beating Pyle one after another, and he's crying and whimpering this whole time. And then they Cowboy and the others put pressure on Joker to also beat Pyle. And this whole time, Joker has been very kind and friendly and helpful to Pyle. So it's sort of a moment almost out of character for Joker to take part in this physical attack on Pyle, because Pyle is, vulnerable and, weaker than the other men in terms of his sort of physicality. And, he's seen as maybe a little, weaker or not as mentally strong as well. So, and his vulnerability. So Joker's participation in this beating is sort of, it's a symbolic gesture of how potent or strong the pressure to conform to sort of the masculine norms of this military structure are. That Joker, somebody who sees himself as kind of an individual who's more independent-minded than some of the other killing machines. He sort of sees himself as maybe a little bit apart from that. So it's kind of surprising to see Joker also take part in this beating and to beat his friend Pyle with the soap. So I'm interested to know what you think of Joker's participation in this beating of his friend. We can sort of see it's kind of a moment when Pyle's spirit is broken. He becomes a lot more sort of emotionally cold or distant and mentally kind of falls apart after this beating. And we also see it as kind of a moment, a breaking point for Joker as well. So until this point, Joker has been a friend to Pyle, and here we see him kind of also breaking in terms of his conformity with masculine um, sort of homosocial pressure to participate in this show of aggression. So it's sort of, a breaking point for both of those men. Uh, One losing his spirit, the other sort of conforming mindlessly. So it's an interesting scene. And as a result, we have Pyle sort of mentally deteriorating after being beaten by the men. So we sort of see his characters break down following this scene. So Pyle's transformation occurs as a result of his physical beating by his fellow peers. He thought he, had friends in this group and that he trusted Joker of all the men, and then to be sort of betrayed and physically attacked is, a moment, a very cruel moment that changes Pyle. So he kind of goes from the goofy, silly grin to a very much more sort of colder, more stoic, more kind of emotionally distant, kind of, scary individual. And it becomes more and more apparent that he's sort of losing grasp of himself or who he once was, and is being transformed. So he is he becomes kind of his former identity is erased, and he becomes what he's been taught to be, which is a violent Marine. And he'll start to sort of reinvent himself as a killer. And we'll see the culmination of that at the end of part one. But after this episode, he starts to actually improve in terms of his skill set as a Marine. He becomes harder, and he's even praised by Sergeant Hartman as being born again hard. So it's almost like that beating, killed a part of him, but made him a lot harder on the exterior, right? So he's losing his boyish innocence and becoming that tough, hard shell of a soldier. Um, but his grasp of reality is also slipping. He starts talking to his rifle. That's the one kind of relationship that he now has. His friendships, relationships with the other men are no longer sort of part of his reality. And he excels at one thing, and that's shooting his rifle. And he can now recall or remember all of the sort of strict military protocol. So when Hartman asks him, how many movements did that, uh, gun salute take, he knows exactly what to say in order to get Hartman's approval. So on the surface, it seems like Pyle has become the model Marine. So he's finally been successful as transforming from a civilian, a kind of innocent country boy, to a Marine, a hard, tough Marine. But we'll see the full extent of his transformation um, when his sort of breaking point is exposed upon graduation day. So that's sort of the culmination of this character's transformation when he becomes a killing machine for real. So we'll see that we'll talk about that in our next lecture.